Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Closed Doors. Today we have the workshop on location in Emmeloord. Now what is on location in Emmeloord? Well, it's exactly what it says. Today we are shooting outside. We have our model Nadine, so we have some crazy creative styling. We're gonna bring the Hansel Porties and we're gonna find locations that you may or may not find interesting. And those locations are actually also near your house or studio. The idea today is to find crazy, cool, amazing shots in locations. So, very curious to see what happens, because with these kinds of workshops I never know what's going to happen, because the weather is okay but not perfect. So we're going to use strobes, so that helps. But overall there's a big softbox in the sky, so maybe also some natural light shots. Now just think about which locations we're going to choose for today. So join us for today's episode. Oh, and by the way, today might also be the day that we are receiving our Sony A7RIV already. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that camera. And of course, when we have it, you can expect a full review within, let's say, 1 week or 2 weeks. Because I only do reviews when I really know the camera. I didn't just want to rush out and do a review when I only hold the camera for like 5 minutes. I really want to dive in, but I'm really psyched about this camera. So, for obvious reasons, of course. Okay, so why is this workshop so incredibly important? The most heard complaint from attendees of workshops, but also photographers that you talk to, is, Frank, that boring backdrop. Frank, my locations aren't interesting enough. Frank, and there's always something following where I go like, yeah, but why? And the thing is, it's not about your camera. It's not about that lens that isn't 100% sharp. It's not about, I don't have the proper lighting. It sounds a little bit harsh, but most of the time it's actually more like an excuse why you can't do something. Now, today's idea is actually not to go to crazy cool locations. It's actually to go to locations that are very close to our studio or our home. We live very close to our studio, so in our case it's actually the same. And just find locations where you go like, I don't know if this is interesting, but it doesn't look like it. And then when you light it and you put your model in front of it and you tell your story, that's when that scene actually comes to life and people go like, now I get it, this is interesting. Because believe it or not, around your studio and your home, there are so many incredibly cool locations to shoot. But it's all about finding that little bit of crop, so what you see through the camera, and finding the proper lighting and styling for that set, in other words, storytelling. Now this is also one of the reasons why you see a lot of filmmakers actually carrying around that little lens around their neck. For the very simple reason, if they see a scene and they go like, nah, that's not interesting, they take that little viewfinder and they go like, ooh, this is cool. Or they see a scene and they go like, this is amazing, and they get that little viewfinder and they go like, nah, that doesn't work. Now, one of the things that I always tell people when I do the street and travel photography workshop is, did you ever shoot that amazing scene, that waterfall where everything was like heavenly cool? And you come home and you can't find that shot. The only thing you can find is that one lousy shot where you go like, that doesn't look like it at all, but that was in that same location. And then you realize that's actually the shot you took. Well, that happened to me a few times too, more than a few times. The thing is, when we look with our own eyes, we see a lot. We see, some people say 50 mil. I don't agree with that, because you can use your wide angle view or your more zoomed in view, but you know what I mean, right? You see a certain scene. Now, as soon as you grab your camera, that scene totally changes, because now, depending on the lens you use, you have distortion, you have a certain crop, a field of view, you have your depth of field, of course, after you take the shot. So the camera gives you a totally different view. And that's why I love cameras like the Sony, who has an EVF, electronic viewfinder, because now, at least the lighting, you can dial in exactly the way you want. But looking through that lens, that's key. Because as soon as you look through the lens, the whole scene changes and it goes to something that fits on a photograph or a video. When you look without camera, you see something totally different. And when you see something without camera, it can look way more interesting. On the other hand, some things that don't look interesting can look way more interesting through the camera. And that's what today is all about. So join us for the outside part of our workshop, because today we start with the Q&A and then we're going to go around our studio, and after lunch we're actually going to go on location with the cars. We only have a small group today because with the outside workshops I don't want big groups when we do them in Emmeloord. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting day. Join us.
What's up? What's going on? Simple truth, I'm low. Let's get it on. Touching the stars, touching the stars. Dancing, 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 feel like dancing in the moonlight. Dancing, 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 feel like dancing in the spotlight. Depending on you, depending.
Okay, set number 1. Now normally we tell you with each set what kind of gear we use and the idea behind the set. Well, today gear wise it's very simple. Every set was shot with the Hensel 40, that's a 1200 watt power battery pack, and we're using the Hensel 14-inch reflector. And that 14-inch reflector, I think that's the magic bullet for me. It's a reflector, so that means that we have very harsh light, but it's a very big reflector, and that means that the light is a little bit softer. Another big thing about that 14-inch reflector is it's very deep. So that means that it really steers the light towards the model, but the other thing is you get a lot of light output. Just to give you an idea, today 4 people were shooting and we did shoot a lot on almost full power, but because we used the 14-inch reflector, we didn't have to shoot on full power. Now let me explain this. When I say full power, you can of course say, hey, was the battery pack on full power? In this case, I mean that we're actually shooting towards the limits of our lenses. So that means f16, f22. The higher your lens can't go. So we're using that Hensel 40 and we were actually almost all the time below 75% light output. That means that that battery runs forever. Not forever, it runs a long time. So 4 people shooting today, we did I believe 4 setups and we're still at 20% left in the battery pack. And that's all thanks to that 14-inch reflector. If outside I would be using, for example, a strip light, that strip light eats away your lighting. So that means that you need a lot more power and your battery drains faster. The recycling time is longer. So when you have a system that you also use outside, find something like that 14-inch reflector from Hensel. If you're in the Allengram system, you can actually try to find a Maxi Spot or a Maxi Light. I believe for Pro Photo it's the Magnum, but the 14-inch reflector from Hensel, I highly recommend it, and they can also change it so it fits your strobe system. And if you don't want it to be changed by your dealer, maybe it's too expensive or whatever, you can go on AliExpress and just order a converter from your brand to Hensel, and you can use that 14-inch reflector also on your system. And the cool thing about that one is we also have a grid for it. Today we didn't use the grid, but you can still use a grid. Okay, first setup is actually right outside our studio, on the other side of the road. It's a simple wall, as you saw in the video. It doesn't look really special, but on images it always works like a charm. And here I choose really low angles to shoot more majestic shots, and a little bit a lower angle to shoot more the normal looking shots. So here are the results. I hope you like them.
So hard to see from the moment we
Now today was all about location, 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 right? And I had this location in my mind where I wanted to go. We drove to the location and I couldn't find it anymore. So that's a problem, right? So we just decided to drive somewhere else, and we saw this tree with a little bit of a leading line behind it and some really cool grass on the floor. And that's a scene we actually see a lot over here. But because we couldn't find that first location, the location I wanted to go to, we just decided, okay, let's stop here and let's do the photo shoot. It was a very, very uninspiring set. But when you look at the results, thanks to the styling from Nadine and the lighting, and of course the angle you choose, you can create something that really speaks to the viewer. At least I love those shots. Now some of the shots, of course, were also shot with the Lens Baby, like in the previous set. I didn't tell you that, right? And you can see the Lens Baby shots because they have a little bit of a funky focus, which I really, really like. Today, by the way, I'm using the Lens Baby with the Composer Pro and on the 35H. It's a really, really nice lens. It's a more wide-angle lens, and by breaking that composer, so tilting that composer, you get some really, really cool, funky focus effects, which I really like. Okay, let's go to the results. And again here, the Porty from Hensel with the 14-inch reflector. Now, of course, we didn't give up. I wanted to go to that one location. And in the end, we did find it again. It was just a left turn instead of a right turn. Well, yeah, I was there like half a year ago, so I forgot. And the cool thing about this location is, and that's something that I look in a lot of locations, I want to use a location at least for 2 different looks and preferably for 3. And in this case, we have the water on the back and we have 2 bridges. And the back bridge isn't that interesting, but that 4 bridge, that's actually something that I really like. It's a little bit run down, a little bit urbex. So we placed our model in front of it. This time we used another model, actually Nadine's intern, Rose. As she was standing in front with her nice angel wings. And the only thing you have to make sure is, and that was also one of the difficult parts of this setup, she has black wings and we want to make the backdrop really, really dark. And this is where a light meter comes in very, very handy. What you do is you use a reflective light meter and you meter the part behind the black wings. Now when you close down or stop down your lens 4.5 stops, that part will be totally black because you're shooting on an 18% gray. So divided by 2, you come to 9, 4.5, 2.2, 1.1, 5 stops will probably be totally black. So that's how we end up at 4.5 stops. If you want to know more about this, by the way, check out our commercial instructional videos. Those go way further because this is just a vlog, you know, just giving you some information, but this is more like a behind the scenes video. So all the information I give you, well, it's nothing compared to the original instructional video. So anyway, so we metered the back and made sure that there's like half a stop difference between the wings and that bridge. And at that point you can see that the wings still stand out, but that bridge is really nice and dark. So it's not too bright, it's not too dark, it's just perfect. Now, if you do something like this and you find out that it's not perfect, just lower your shutter speed. Because if you lower the shutter speed, you leave in more of the ambient light. And the strobe is still the aperture. The strobe doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the available light. So that means that the bridge will get a little bit lighter. I do urge you to not do this in the field when you're looking at the back of your camera. I showed that today a few times at the students. And the thing is, when you look at the back of your camera, in all instances, it looks like I was shooting a little bit too dark. So the idea is actually open up just a little bit to let in more of that available light. However, on the computer, those images were perfect. So if I would have changed my shutter speed, I would have all those images a little bit too bright. The thing is, when you're using strobes on location, you're actually shooting HDR. Now, normally HDR, I always make the joke that's highly destructive retouching, but in essence it's of course highly of a high dynamic range. So what you do is your available light is controlled by your shutter speed. The strobe is actually controlled by the aperture. So if you want to make that background really dark, what you shoot is on, for example, 160th of a second, and you're shooting your strobe on f16. If you go like, okay, that backdrop is a little bit too dark, make it brighter. You don't have to change anything on the lighting on your model. You just lower your shutter speed and you will see that the ambient light actually will go up in exposure and gives you more of that available light on the backdrop. So make the bridge a little bit brighter. If you do this correctly, you end up with stunning shots. If you make it too dark, you can still get some of the shadow detail up in Lightroom or Capture One or Photoshop. But if you make it too bright, there's no way to go down darker, or you have to make a selection and make everything dark, but that's way too much work. Okay, so that was set number 3. Let's take a look at those shots. And we actually did 2. One on the bridge and one before. But next set I'm gonna explain what we did on the bridge. Final set for today was actually on the bridge. So we had Nadine on the bridge shooting from a low angle. Now when you look at the strobe, and this is why we include this in a separate part, you see that one of the attendees is constantly holding the strobe. When you buy stands, don't ever try to save money on stands. We're using Manfrotto stands, and those stands are really sturdy and they can go up really high. So when you see the video, it's not even on the highest point. But the problem was there was a lot of wind, and now you get the other benefit from that 14-inch reflector. If you have a big softbox, it was impossible to do this because there was so much wind. A big softbox would end up in the water probably, including my attendee who was holding the stand probably. So by using that 14-inch reflector, it's not that prone to wind. So it still moved around a lot, but it's not gonna blow away. However, make sure that somebody holds that stand because this was really high up. Again, it's not the top end of that of the Manfrotto stand. It can go higher, but we didn't want to do that here because, again, the wind. So on location, you can use sandbags, of course, to weigh down your stands. Those are absolutely highly recommended. But when you go that high, make sure somebody holds that stand. You don't want to end up with defective strobes or whatever. And when you go down from 3 meters down, that will destroy it. Okay, so lighting wise, very simple. I always try to light my models slightly under an angle that you get that really nice side light and a little bit of shadow on the other side. And just shoot from a low angle and try to squeeze in that little bit of the bridge and then that sky behind it that makes it really threatening. And then in Photoshop or Capture One or Lightroom, whatever you use, just tint it a little bit. My personal favorite software for that is, of course, Alien Skin Exposure or Luminar or DxO Film Pack. And you get the shots. So take a look at the results. Okay guys, that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed the images and of course the behind the scenes look. Again, if you want more information, please check out our commercial instructional videos. I will leave the link below. Those are way more in depth than what I do in the vlog. The vlog actually started as a behind the scenes video. I got a little bit bored of it after a year and I was going like, they all look the same, you know. The workshops are always different for the students that are here. But when you see the behind the scenes videos, there's this repetitive pattern and I hate that. So I decided, let's just, after every set, just stop and I give you some information about the set. But again, this is not an instructional video, so it's more like behind the scenes information. Again, if you like it, subscribe, leave comments below, and of course hit that like button. If you don't like it, well, hit that down like button twice. So, see you again next time. Tomorrow we have the workshop Smoke and Props. So that means that we're going to use smoke and, well, props. See you tomorrow. Bye guys. Oh, before we go, you remember at the start of this vlog, I actually told you guys that maybe today the Sony A7RIV would be coming in. It did. And today all shots were done with the A7R IV. I can already tell you, It's a really cool camera. Really high resolution, but that's not something that I'm really, impressed by, for the very simple reason I'm used to medium format cameras that actually shoot on 80, 60 or even 100 megapixels. But it's always not the pixels, it's the quality, the dynamic range, the high ISO performance. And this camera just does it all. It's really interesting. Now, as soon as I know more about the camera, I will do a review for you guys online and of course in the vlog. So that was really it for today. See you again tomorrow.